morning, you're watching AnewZ. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the top stories for the hour. Macron says that security guarantees for Ukraine are ready and will be endorsed today. Lisbon's historic Gloria funicular derails, killing 15 people and injuring 18 others. Trump says the US may have to unwind trade deals with several trade partners. European leaders are preparing to sign off on long-term security commitments for Ukraine. The pledge comes in a critical moment as Kiev faces yet another wave of Russian airstrikes targeting vital infrastructure.
French President Emmanuel Macron announced that security guarantees for Ukraine are ready and will be formally endorsed on Thursday by a coalition of the willing nations backing Kiev. Hosting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the Élysée Palace in Paris, Macron said Europe is ready to offer the guarantees as soon as the peace agreement with Russia is reached. He emphasised that all the groundwork is already done.
Nous sommes prêts, nous Européens.
We are ready, as Europeans, to offer security guarantees to Ukraine and the Ukrainian people the day a peace deal is signed. This is the commitment we made in Washington. The contributions that were prepared, documented and confirmed this afternoon at the level of the defence ministers in an extremely confidential manner allow me to say the preparatory work is complete.
Zelensky welcomed the unified position of Europe, Ukraine and the United States, saying it might pressure Moscow to seek a diplomatic resolution.
Unfortunately, we have not received any signals from Russia that it truly wants to end this war, but I am convinced that our union, above all the Union of Europe, the Europe that has been at our side since the beginning of the war, and that this union between Europe and the United States will help us increase pressure on Russia to move towards a diplomatic solution to this complex issue, so important for peace in Ukraine and for achieving a stable peace in Ukraine and in Europe.
The leaders of Ukraine and France aligned their positions ahead of Thursday's meeting of the Coalition of the Willing. Some partners will attend the talks in Paris, while others will join online. According to the French presidency, about 30 leaders are expected to review progress on security guarantees for Ukraine. After the Paris meeting, several European leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, will hold a joint call with US President Donald Trump to discuss the next steps. The meeting came as Russian forces carried out a large-scale air attack on Ukraine, striking energy and transport infrastructure. Kyiv continues to demand firm security guarantees to prevent any future Russian aggression.
Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday claimed he never refused a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and invited him to Moscow, while Russia fired more than 500 drones and missiles at Kyiv overnight, damaging energy and civilian infrastructure. Speaking at a news conference in Beijing, Putin said US President Donald Trump asked him to meet with Zelensky during their meeting last month in Alaska, and that he conveyed to the American leader his readiness to do so. But the Russian president warned Russia would carry on fighting in Ukraine if a peace deal cannot be reached. Ukrainian Foreign Minister AnewZ Sybiha dismissed the invitation as unacceptable, noting that at least 7 countries are ready to host a meeting between leaders of Ukraine and Russia to bring an end to the war.
If we're just talking about a meeting with the current head of the administration, let's put it that way, then yes, it's possible. I have never refused this, provided the meeting is well prepared and can lead to some positive potential outcomes. By the way, Donald Trump asked me if I could possibly arrange such a meeting. I replied that yes, it's possible. Ultimately, if Zelensky is ready, let him come to Moscow, then the meeting will take place.
European Union member states are set to allocate their highest ever amount toward military spending. The €381 billion budget comes as the continent faces heightened security risks from Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. Our Anita Sharma reports from the Netherlands.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where EU leaders brace for a record surge in military spending this year. According to the European Defence Agency, the 27 member states of the European Union are expected to allocate close to €381 billion, the highest level in its history, as pressure mounts from Russia's ongoing aggression and heightened security risks on the continent. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas says Europe is spending record amounts on defence to keep our people safe, and we will not stop there. For years, EU nations were criticized, particularly by Washington, for underspending on security and relying too heavily on NATO's U.S. umbrella. But the latest data shows a coordinated shift. More money is flowing into tanks, fighter jets, and advanced cyber defense. NATO members promised last June at the summit in The Hague to significantly hike annual defense spending after pressure from the U.S. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has permanently reshaped Europe's priorities. Countries like Germany, Poland, and the Baltic states are leading the push, accelerating procurement programs and boosting stockpiles. The Ukrainian president is in Copenhagen today for the Nordic-Baltic summit, which was arranged on short notice. Volodymyr Zelensky says they will discuss, quote, the need for strong pressure measures. He heads to France afterwards to meet EU and U.S. allies to discuss next steps with the coalition of the willing countries that promise to help Ukraine. The UK is among those willing and is reportedly in advanced talks to build warships for Denmark and Sweden. Sources say the discussions follow Sunday's announcement of Britain's large warship export deal with Norway, further strengthening London's role as a key defense supplier to Scandinavia. Norway says it will purchase at least 5 British Type 26 frigates. Experts note the timing is no coincidence. With Russia's fleet still active in the Baltic and Arctic regions, London and northern capitals are bolstering ties to ensure maritime security. Taken together, the EU's record defense spending and Britain's deepening naval partnerships with Scandinavia highlight a continent reshaping its security landscape, facing the reality of long-term confrontation with Moscow. For AnewZ, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Lisbon is reeling from a sudden tragedy after the city's historic Gloria funicular derailed, leaving at least 15 dead and 18 injured. Authorities say 5 of the injured are in serious condition, and an investigation into the cause of the crash is underway.
At least 15 people were killed and 18 others injured on Wednesday when Lisbon's historic Gloria funicular derailed, emergency services said. The yellow tram running up the steep hill was badly damaged. Rescue teams pulled victims from the wreckage as firefighters and police secured the area.
Let's start with the total number of injured in this accident, where we highlight 5 seriously injured who were transported to the hospitals of Santa Maria São José and São Francisco Xavier. We also have a total of 13 minor injuries, among whom we note a child admitted to Santa Maria Hospital. As for the fatalities, the final number so far is 15.
Fire Commander Alexandre Rodriguez said his teams were alerted at 6:08 p.m. and arrived in just 3 minutes. He added that investigators will now determine the cause of the derailment. People are in shock as the Gloria funicular, running since 1885, carries about 3 million passengers a year.
I came because I saw the news on the internet. According to reports at the moment, there are 15 dead.
Authorities have not released the names or nationalities of the victims, but confirmed that some foreigners were among the dead.
Trump said on Wednesday the US might have to unwind trade deals it reached with the European Union, Japan and South Korea, among others, if it loses a Supreme Court tariffs case, and warned that a loss would cause the US to suffer so greatly. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump said his administration will ask the Supreme Court to reverse a US appeals court ruling last week that found many of his tariffs were illegal. Trump, however, said he thought his administration would prevail in the case. Trump said that duties gave him leverage to strike deals with major trading partners across the world that saw America levying import duties on their products without any reasonable retaliation.
But now we made a deal with the European Union where they're paying us almost $1 trillion, and they're happy to do it. You know what? They're happy it's done. These deals are all done. I guess we'd have to unwind them. We've done deals with Japan, with South Korea. We've done deals with many countries and others to come.
Oil prices rose Tuesday as renewed fighting between Russia and Ukraine fueled supply concerns. Brent crude hit $68.35 a barrel, up 0.5%, while US West Texas Intermediate rose to $64.73. Markets are watching the September 7th OPEC Plus meeting for signals on production levels. At their last gathering, the group, including Saudi Arabia, Russia and Iraq, agreed to raise output by 547,000 barrels per day. Recent Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities, including drone strikes on Odessa and the possibility of new US sanctions, have added pressure on global oil markets. Germany has long stood as one of Georgia's key supporters on its path to the European Union. But recently, Berlin's tone has changed, balancing encouragement with caution. A video message from Germany's ambassador has stirred debate, particularly among young Georgians over what EU membership truly entails and how distant it might still be. Our correspondent has more.
Germany's message to Georgia on its European path is changing, and that matters. In a video to the Ilya Uni student movement, German ambassador Peter Fischer stressed that the European Union has offered Georgia membership. He called it an invitation to live together in the living room of Europe. Fischer told students that joining would not mean giving up traditions, religion or national pride, pointing to the EU's own diversity where 27 member states coexist with their cultures and faiths. But the ambassador also issued a stark warning. Under the current course of Georgia's government, EU membership will not be possible. Even visa-free travel, he said, could be at risk. That's a striking shift. Germany has traditionally been one of Georgia's most reliable advocates in Brussels. Now Berlin's tone reflects broader European unease about Tbilisi's direction. In Brussels, the picture is clear. The door for Georgia remains open, but only if democratic reforms and rule of law are strengthened. Support is conditional, a contrast to earlier years when Europe's backing felt more unconditional. At home, the message is politically charged. The ruling Georgian Dream Party often argues that the EU integration would erode national identity and religion. Fischer rejected that, noting that Europe itself is built on faith, freedom and tradition, from Catholic Malta to Protestant Denmark, from Orthodox Bulgaria to secular France. It's Nini Nicolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, AnewZ.
New data from the National Statistics Office of Georgia shows a modest rise in the country's inflation last month, increasing by 0.3%. The annual inflation rate now stands at 4.6%. This was primarily driven by higher prices for transport and certain food items like fruit and dairy. However, consumers found some relief with a sharp 10% drop in vegetable prices and lower costs for clothing. These decreases help to balance out the overall price increases across the economy. Azerbaijani economists warn that Armenia's recent spike in trade may be helping Russia evade international sanctions. The researchers say this surge could be indirectly fueling Russia's war in Ukraine.
A new report by Azerbaijan's Economics International Public Union for Economic Research has revealed suspicious patterns in Armenia's import and export operations, suggesting the country may be helping Russia bypass international sanctions and support its war in Ukraine. The research group says Armenia's foreign trade has surged dramatically in recent years, raising questions about the source and purpose of these imports and exports. Union's chairman, Fikret Yusufov, highlighted what he called an unusual discrepancy between Armenia's economic growth and its trade figures.
Even though Armenia's economy has only doubled in recent years, its foreign trade turnover has increased 4.2 times. This is a complete anomaly. The state budget grew by only 65%, yet import and export figures have risen so rapidly. These discrepancies indicate that Armenia is channeling Russian products through its territory, and to cover the tracks, it presents re-exported goods as its own.
Yusufov also noted that imports of luxury goods such as pearls, precious and semi-precious stones and metals surged from $248 million in 2021 to over $7.4 billion in 2024. More than a 30-fold increase. He warned that such a sharp rise is highly unusual for a country still recovering economically after the war. Economist Malik Hassanov added that hundreds of companies owned by Russian businessmen have appeared in Armenia since the war began, many suspected of conducting shadowy operations.
Official statistics show that Armenia's imports from Russia were $1.7 billion in 2021, but by 2024 this figure had risen to $9.2 billion. 75% of this growth consists of precious metals and stones. Exports of the same products have increased by 2,180% in 5 years. The figures clearly show that Armenia is taking Russian goods and selling them as its own in the Middle Eastern markets. The banking sector is also open to Moscow's use, and Armenia cannot conduct independent economic policy.
Experts also emphasized that breaching sanctions carries severe legal consequences, including fines, imprisonment, and asset seizure. The briefing concluded with a warning that Armenia's role in facilitating trade is indirectly financing Russia's war, undermining international law, and giving Moscow a critical lifeline to continue its military operations in Ukraine.
Uzbekistan and China have signed deals worth more than $500 million at the recent Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in Tianjin. For more on that, we go to Tashkent and our Sevil Rajapova.
Uzbekistan and China have signed agreements worth $550 million to expand cooperation in agriculture and innovation. The projects include a $150 million initiative to grow and process tobacco across 3 Uzbek regions, with annual production expected to reach 30,000 tons of raw materials. Alongside this, a $400 million Uzbek-Chinese Innovation Center will be established in Jizak region on 30 hectares of land, with construction beginning in 2026. The center is set to drive modern farming technologies, agritourism and research cooperation. These deals were concluded during the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin, where President Shavkat Mirziyoyev participated in high-level discussions. The summit resulted in the adoption of the Tianjin Declaration and the SCO development strategy until 2035, outlining new goals for trade, transport, security and green transformation. On the sidelines, President Shavkat Mirziyoyev met with Chinese President Xi Jinping, as both leaders praised the record bilateral trade, which reached $14 billion last year, with plans to raise it to $20 billion. They also signed agreements in healthcare, digital economy, education, culture and space research. The Uzbek leader further held talks with heads of major Chinese corporations, securing commitments for new joint ventures in energy, infrastructure and advanced industry, adding to a portfolio of projects already exceeding $60 billion. In Beijing, President Shavkat Mirziyoyev also met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The two leaders emphasized the importance of maintaining momentum in trade and investment cooperation, accelerating new joint projects in priority sectors, and deepening regional ties, including throughout industrial parks.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan outlined Ankara's efforts to strengthen ties with Beijing on his return from China, where he took part in the SCO summit. Our Aliya Aziz has more from Istanbul.
Turkey is stepping up efforts to deepen ties with China, while also keeping a firm hand in global peace diplomacy. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, speaking on his return from the SCO summit in Tianjin, said Ankara is working to expand cooperation with Beijing in fields ranging from trade and energy to health and digital technologies. He underlined that Turkey doesn't see East-West division, but rather seeks to build connections across regions. Erdogan also pressed for China's support in shaping what he called a more prosperous international order, noting that Turkey will continue to defend dialogue-based, people-centered policies on every platform. On the Russia-Ukraine war, he reaffirmed that negotiations remain the only path to peace. Erdogan recalled Turkey's success in brokering the Black Sea grain corridor and prisoner swaps, saying talks in Istanbul had already proven the potential of dialogue. He emphasized that Ankara stays in close contact with both President Vladimir Putin and President Volodymyr Zelensky, urging all sides to make peace over conflict. Erdogan also highlighted regional developments, pointing to the Zangezur Corridor agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia as a step that will boost trade, open borders, and to expand normalization in the South Caucasus. For Ankara, strengthening ties with Beijing, advancing peace in Ukraine, and supporting regional stability all point that Turkey intends to advocate for world peace and stability. For AnewZ, this is Aliya Aziz, Istanbul, Turkey.
Days after the magnitude 6 earthquake hit eastern Afghanistan, the death toll continues to rise. The numbers so far stand at more than 1,400 killed and over 3,000 injured. Rescue teams are working to help survivors, but some affected areas remain inaccessible and many are still trapped under the rubble.
In Afghanistan's Kunar province, a devastating earthquake has resulted in a tragic death toll and widespread destruction. Sunday night's magnitude 6 earthquake affected several provinces, causing extensive damage. Also on Tuesday, a second large quake of magnitude 5.5 shook the same region, leading to fears of yet more destruction in a country crippled by poverty, war and shrinking aid. The Defence Ministry said 40 flights had evacuated 420 victims as rescue teams moved from badly hit villages to more remote hamlets. While many survivors have been airlifted to safety, they now face the anguish of loss. Among them is Yunus Han, a local resident who lost at least 12 members of his family in the disaster.
Such an earthquake had never happened before. 2 years ago, there was an earthquake that destroyed houses, but no one was killed. Only a few houses collapsed. We have never witnessed such an earthquake in history. You can see for yourself that helicopters are arriving to transport the wounded and the dead. And if you go to the cemetery, you will see the freshly dug graves of both children and adults.
Most survivors remain stranded among the ruins, burying their dead in graveyards, filling with freshly dug plots for children and adults. Aid workers are just reaching the remote hamlets, but harsh weather and rugged terrain have hampered rescue work.
We have nothing left. Even the little food we had was completely destroyed. My house is there. You can see it has collapsed. And we are afraid that rocks might fall from the mountain, so we left that place and came here.
It is the third major earthquake since the Taliban took power in 2021 and the latest crisis to hit Afghanistan, which is struggling with deep cuts in humanitarian aid, a weak economy, and millions of Afghans forcibly returned from Iran and Pakistan.
That's the news update from us in Baku this morning. Stay tuned to AnewZ for more updates.